Hey, it's Sri here. In today's video, I'm going to talk you through 4 key ways that you can use to begin to effectively communicate and communicate in a classy way with your husband if your marriage is on the verge of a divorce or if you just wanted to take it to another level. Now, before we dive in, I just want to let you know that I'm opening up a few spots for my Authentic Relationship System training program, which you'll absolutely love and is all geared around helping you to become the best version of you, which then leads you to creating an extraordinary marriage or relationship. It's an amazing program. We go in depth into your own growth and the growth of your marriage, and specifically teach you about male psychology as well, because men and women are very, very different. And so just wait around to the very end and I'll give you all the details about how you can speak to me individually and determine if this is the right fit for you. Now make sure you hit the subscribe button below so that every Sundays and Tuesdays you get notified when I've released my latest videos on how you can create the most extraordinary marriage, how you can grow within yourself, and how you can learn specifically about male psychology as well. Because you're probably at a place where you're like, I just don't understand my husband. So I want to teach you some specific strategies on how you can understand your husband better than he knows himself. Now, communications is a fascinating topic in relationships because you see people who have been in love for years and then over time it just slowly deteriorates. The little things just compound and compound and compound to the point where after a while they're not even interested in talking with each other at all, or one person's not interested and the other person's trying to push hard to reignite the communication and reignite the spark. But we have to ask ourselves, how exactly do we get to that point? How do we get to this point where we were in this amazing relationship and now suddenly we're barely saying a word and we're just roommates? Now the reality is that it's often the little things that compound over time. I recall a conversation that me and my wife had one time, and it was about which cherry tomatoes that we should purchase at the supermarket. And you're probably sitting there going, really? But the reality is that so many people have such silly arguments. It's over the most minute things. And we have to ask ourselves, how is it that it's those little things that seem to compound over time? What's the reason that brings up so much pain and so many insecurities and so many frustrations in a marriage? What I'm going to talk you through now is a few reasons as to why communication breaks down so easily and so rapidly as well. Now, the first reason why communication will often deteriorate is because of the law of familiarity. Now, essentially what we're talking about here when we talk about the law of familiarity is that if we've been around something long enough, after a while we begin to take it for granted. And if we think about that with anything, right? Like imagine yourself going and buying a new iPhone. You get really excited about getting the new model. And then you go and grab it, and then after a while, within a very short space of time, you probably look at your phone and think, oh well, this phone does exactly the same thing that the previous model did. And after a while, it just doesn't become as exciting. It just becomes this practical device that you use on a regular basis. But at the beginning, you were so excited about it. And the same thing applies with relationships, is that at the beginning, it's something new, it's something fresh. And then over time, things begin to deteriorate because you've simply just started taking it for granted. You've taken those little things for granted. You've just gotten used to, your spouse just going to work and doing his thing and then coming home and doing whatever it is that he does around the house and so on. And you guys coexist and you're probably spending lots of time with your children, helping to raise them and so forth, but you're not really investing a lot of the time and the energy into the marriage itself. So with anything in life, we begin to take it for granted because of the law of familiarity, because we've been around that environment enough and we're not regularly putting the emotional deposits in the bank. And if we're not putting enough emotional deposits in the bank, then eventually things begin to decline, things begin to subside, and then you end up having that cataclysmic moment, which is, some sort of infidelity or some sort of comment which is, I'm not sure if this is the right marriage for me anymore. It's not that you guys aren't ideal for each other or aren't suited for each other. It's often those little things that have compounded over time that have ended up resulting in the marriage or relationship declining because you haven't put enough time and energy into each other. Now, the second reason that communication often breaks down over time is that needs aren't being met. It's incredible how many times when couples are together that they end up just keeping a lot of their thoughts and their opinions to themselves. They don't want to rock the boat. They don't want to create any tension or frustration or anger or whatever, because they're afraid of how their partner is actually going to react. So what do? They keep it to themselves. And because that communication isn't open, both parties prevent themselves from actually getting their needs met because they're not actually telling each other what they need. And then also, if you've had a negative experience where you have trying to communicate it, and then that person ends up, getting defensive or frustrated that you're actually making that request, then that's going to cause you to go into your shell as well. But needs not being met is going to end up resulting in a complete breakdown of communication. And then over time, once again, it compounds and compounds and compounds. And then you have that moment, which may be infidelity, which may be a request for a divorce, or it just may be that you're just living as roommates and you're not going anywhere, nothing's changing, but there's no passion, there's no excitement, there's no fun, there's nothing enjoyable about it, you're just simply coexisting. Now the third reason is emotional stacking or negative stacking. Now what do I mean by that? It means that if we get into enough negative patterns over and over and over, whether that's just the communication with our partner, or whether that's just us being in a negative place over and over and over, you'll keep stacking and stacking and stacking and stacking, and that becomes your center of gravity. So you end up in a place where you're just in a negative emotional state. Now what happens when we're in a negative emotional state? We say bad things, we say things that we regret, we often say nothing as well. We shut down because we're afraid of what the other person is going to say to us, or we're afraid that they're not going to create the level of emotional safety for us or that safe environment in order to be able to express yourself. Because my guess is that you've probably tried to communicate a few things to your husband and then he's probably shut you down or hasn't really understood. And this often can happen because guys will want to come in there and want to try and fix the problem. Whereas you're probably listening to what he's saying and thinking, look, I just want him to listen, I want him to understand, and I want him to be present with me. But he's going in there with this solution mode hat on. And then that's once again going to cause you to back off, to feel like you're not understood, and to not really feel like you feel safe enough to be able to communicate your own needs with him as well. So that's another reason that communication can often break down. Now the fourth reason that causes communications to break down is the shadow part of ourselves. Now what do I mean by that? It means that in life, all of us have parts of ourselves that we really, really enjoy about ourselves, and then parts of us that we kind of dislike. And if we are someone that is always happy and joyful and loving and caring and so forth, and that's who we are most of the time, there's going to be some times occasionally where that shadow comes out. And that might be the part of you that gets a little bit angry. That might be the part of you that is critical. That might be the part of you that's judgmental. And often what happens in a relationship is that our partner often brings up that shadow part of ourselves. So they create these feelings inside of us which lead to us being judgmental, that lead to us being frustrated and angry and critical and so on. And the more of that shadow that comes up, the more pain that we're going to feel. And the more pain that we feel, the more that we're going to react negatively towards the other person as well. So you really want to become aware of how much your shadow is coming up, how much of those darker aspects of yourself are coming up in your relationship or marriage. And believe me, it happens to all of us. Okay, it's impossible to constantly live in happiness and joy all the time. That's not the path that we're trying to take. We're trying to strike balance here. But to strike balance, you have to become aware of the fact that you're having these polarizing views and these polarizing aspects of your personality, so that you can then understand and become aware of what's triggering that, and then you can actually begin to effectively communicate with your partner as well. Now just quickly, in the comment section below, I just want you to answer the question, what's the single biggest challenge that you face when it comes to communicating with your husband? Just quickly write your answers below. So we've got a really good handle now of what causes a relationship to deteriorate in terms of communication. But what we need to understand now is, how do we actually go about creating that shift? How do we turn it around? What I'm going to do is I'm going to talk you through 4 steps that you can begin to apply to begin to turn around your communication right now. So the first step that you want to take is to create a pattern interrupt. In other words, you want to shock the system. Now let's say you and your husband are having a conversation and he starts to get a little bit defensive or a little bit grumpy. Now that's going to naturally turn you as well. It's going to make you feel hurt. It's not going to make you feel misunderstood, and it's going to make you feel unsafe as well. So in that moment, you want to shock the system. You want to create a pattern interrupt. Now, what I mean by that is you want to do something that's going to be so outrageous, or just flip the script a little bit so that he actually gets off that negative train of thought and starts to maybe get into a light-hearted place, or maybe get a little bit more humorous. So you might want to just crack a stupid little joke in that time. Or you might want to do something outrageous, like get up and just start randomly dancing out of nowhere. Now I know these sound really stupid and sound a little bit outrageous, but that's the whole idea, is you want to do some of these outrageous things so that it just breaks them off their train of thought. You know, when he's on that negative train of thought and he's just continuing to go down that path, it's just going to keep stacking and stacking and stacking, and you're going to get nowhere. That I can promise you. However, if you can break that pattern, if you can get him to just get off that train of thought and actually find something quite funny, or maybe you guys have some silly little jokes that you do with each other. You want to bring those out in some of those moments. You want to read the situation and do that in those moments. Because if you do that and you make him laugh, then suddenly what happens is you can begin to communicate with him and speak your truth in a really, really calm and loving way, rather than as soon as you guys start to butt heads. As soon as that happens, it's going to break everything off. So you want to make sure that you begin to break that pattern. And everyone's got their own unique ways of trying to do this. You know, what me and my wife do is very different to how you might approach things. You know, we have some really, really silly inner jokes that, you know, we'll bring up from time to time, we'll have fun with. So that if we notice that things are starting to go down that path of, you know, some negativity, we immediately engage in those behaviors. And that allows us to get back on track and actually really communicate in a very loving and authentic way. So that's a really important step to take. Break that pattern. Use some of those inner jokes or ways in which you guys have, you know, laughed in the past. Bring those into the moment, and that will allow you to just get back on track and not go down that path of negativity and hurt and anger and frustration and so on. Now, the second step that you can take to begin to communicate effectively is to change your emotional state. Now, when we are in a bad emotional place, we will absolutely have poor communication. And that's nothing to do with anything that you're doing, or, you know, that we're bad people or anything like that. All it is just when we're in a crappy emotional state, we're going to say crappy things. We're going to do crappy things. We're not going to act in a way that's loving and compassionate. So therefore, when you're about to have any heavy communications with your partner, you want to make sure that you're in a really loving and compassionate emotional state. Because if you're in that place, then you're actually going to be able to get the message across. And then if he's in a place where, you know, he gets a little bit defensive, you're not going to find yourself as frustrated and as hurt and as misunderstood or anything like that, because you're in a better place within yourself. It is so, so crucial. I cannot stress the importance of this step. And what you can do is, before you start to have those conversations, maybe go and listen to a song that makes you feel really uplifted. Or maybe go and watch a funny TV show beforehand. Just start doing little things that bring you joy first before you go and have those conversations. Because otherwise, if you have those negative conversations and you're in a really crappy state yourself, then all hell is going to break loose. You don't want to get into the trap of hoping that he's going to somehow, you know, be in this loving, compassionate place. Because if he isn't, then that's going to throw you off your game completely. You've got to make sure that you're in a beautiful emotional state as you're communicating with your husband. Now, the third step that you want to apply is to give, and give. You know, so many times we get caught up in our own world. If we can just learn to actually apply the concept of just giving, really learn to give to your partner, to give to your husband, you know, really understand what it is that he's needing in that moment in time. Recognize his world. Recognize that, you know, he's actually going through some challenges in himself. Now, yes, there are some exceptions to this rule. I'm not just going to say and give to a narcissist or a serial cheater or anything like that. But on the assumption that your husband is a good man, you want to make sure that you are really understanding his world. Get to understand where he's coming from on this journey. Because if you can understand, have more compassion for where he's at, you're then going to be able to have a different appreciation. You're going to recognize that he's not this horrible person who doesn't give a shit. He's just a guy who's struggling in himself, just like you're probably struggling in your own self. And when we come from a place of love and compassion and we give and we give and we give, then often it comes back. Life is about giving. The secret to living is giving. It really is about making sure that we come from that beautiful place. That's so crucial and so important on this journey that you're on. Now, like anything, there's a balance that you've got to hit. You know, if you're one of these individuals who constantly finds himself giving and just find their energy levels just depleting, and you feel like you've got nothing to give, then it might be a case of needing to balance that out and lift up your soul and lift up your spirit more. And that's where I really help my clients in the Authentic Relationship System program as well. So make sure you stick around to the end where you can get more information about how you can speak to me directly and learn how you can improve the quality of your own self as well. Now, the fourth step that you can take to begin to improve communications with your husband is to ask powerful questions. You know, so many people forget about the importance of language when it comes to communication. They're always just talking about how they feel inside and how what that person did just ended up making them feel a certain way. But we need to carefully use our words. We need to carefully ask questions. Now, let me give you an example. You know, I was having a difficult conversation with a friend of mine a few weeks ago, and one of the things that was really important to me was to recognize, how can I ensure that we don't blow up here? Because the chances are that if I just ended up just going to town because I was in a pretty drained emotional state, if I just went to town on him and started criticizing him and, you know, critiquing everything that was done, it was never going to work at all. So what I needed to do was make sure that I accessed my heart and that I really understood what was going on in his world. So I started to ask him some powerful questions. And I asked him one question. I said, look, I know that, you know, there's been some challenges between the two of us, but what would be really good is if you could just tell me, what are some of the challenges that you're having with me? What are some things that, you know, you're finding a little bit frustrated? And he ended up speaking his truth to me. And I said, look, that's fair. I didn't get defensive. I didn't go back on him and say, oh, but this is the reason why I did this and that. I didn't do any of that. I just learned to understand where he's coming from. And I said, look, that's fair, and I get that, and I appreciate that. Would it be okay if I just explain a little bit about my point of view on this particular one? He said, yeah, sure. So I explained it to him. And then he got more of an understanding of where I was coming from. And we always just kept that tension down because we were communicating in a really, really beautiful and caring way. But I also took responsibility for all the things that I wasn't showing up for, or that maybe I was interpreting a little bit differently as well. But it all came down to the quality of the conversations and the quality of the questions that I was asking. And because I asked powerful questions where I really understood his world rather than just constantly talking about my own stuff, then we were actually able to have a really, really productive conversation. By the end of it, we were just like, look, I love you, bro. You know, you're such an amazing friend. Thank you so much for everything. And, you know, whether this is just with friendships or, you know, relationships or marriages, whatever, it's the same principles that can apply. We have to make sure that we're asking our partners powerful questions and really getting to understand their world. It's so, so important. And if you do that, I promise you that your communications are going to go to a whole different level because you're not coming from a place of defensiveness. They see naturally in these situations, everyone's circumstances are a little bit different. And, you know, it can feel really overwhelming when we're on our own and we don't have the support that we need and we just sometimes need to get a few questions answered and so on. And so, therefore, I'm a huge believer in the power of a community. I believe in the power of, you know, having lots of people around to support you, to be able to help you on your path, but then having the the ability to actually access someone who is a professional who can actually serve you and help you on your journey as well. And for that reason, I'm going to be opening up a few spots for my Authentic Relationship System training, where I teach my clients how to improve the quality of their communications with their husband, how to awaken their goddess within so they can become their most beautiful feminine self, where they speak from an authentic place and they give off a radiance and a vibe that makes them feel so fulfilled and so light and so beautiful within themselves. But also how to create an extraordinary marriage as well, because utilizing these 3 principles will ensure that moving forward you're in the best place that you possibly can be. So my Authentic Relationship System training is something that will be hugely valuable for you. So all you need to do to see if you're a good fit is click on the link below in the description section. You can speak directly to me just to see if it's a good fit for you. We'll understand where you are now, where you want to get to, and how we can bridge that gap in the shortest possible time. It's an amazing program. You'll absolutely love it. The only thing I ask though is that only book in for a time if you're actually really serious about showing up and that you're serious about putting the work in as well. I'm not talking about hundreds of hours of work, but I'm just talking about having that intention to want to improve and to want to grow your marriage as well. If you have that intent, I promise you, I will step up and give you my all as well. So just click on that link below, choose a time that works for you, and I will call you at the scheduled time. And secondly, if you want to connect with me and some other beautiful souls who have been able to create extraordinary changes in their marriage, all you need to do is come and join my private Facebook group. It's called the Love, Joy and Passion group. Once again, the link is in the description section below. Click on it, I'll give you access to it. You just have to answer a couple of questions, and then we can actually give you more tools, more techniques, and just some beautiful strategies as well to help you to move forward, not just in your marriage, but also within yourself as well. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you've liked it, make sure you hit the like button below. If you want to get more videos like this, make sure you hit the subscribe button. And if you want to learn 4 mandatory mindset shifts that you need to apply if your husband wants to separate, make sure you click this video above. And if you want to learn the 5 stresses that will destroy any marriage, make sure you click this video above. Thank you so much, and I'll talk to you in the next video.